Welcome, everybody. This is an exciting time for me. My name is Dean Walker. I am going to be an assistant or producer, if you will, for this study group with Tim Remple. And Tim is going to be leading us through the reading and hopefully deeper understanding of David Loy's book, Ecodharma. And this is a multi-week series, bi-weekly on these Wednesday evenings. And so my job, if you will, in this particular production is to be the kind of the holder of the tech stuff. I'll be the one who's posting the recordings, and I'm the one that, I hope you will feel very free to contact me if you have any questions about the technical side of the material. And Tim, of course, will make himself available for the curriculum side of the conversation. And this comes to you produced by my little organization, which is called Living Resilience. And the collapse-aware learning series that are offered by Living Resilience, and these are called Deep Academy. So Tim has joined us in Deep Academy for a portion of that work, and it's called Community of Practice. And it's meant to be a community, and Tim is really leading us out in terms of one of the people who's quite obviously a participant in it, but is now stepping up to offer some of his substantial expertise in Buddhist tradition, and doing that through leading this study group in David Loy's book, Ecodharma, Buddhist Teachings for the Ecological Crisis. And so without further ado, thank you all for showing up. My time to be quiet and Tim's time to step up. And if you have any questions this evening about the technical side of things and so on, if you are unaware of chat, it is an option at the bottom of the screen where you can click on that and speak to me directly, personally, or you can also leave a message for other people as well. So with that, Tim, thank you so much for putting this whole thing together, and the floor is yours.
Cool. First of all, thank you very much, Dean, for hosting this and providing all the support and the technical work and the recordings and all of that, because it really helps a lot. It helps a lot. Maybe a place to start is I put up the slide, and I'm pretty sure, let me just double check that everybody can see that okay, that the slide share is working all right. What I have there is the kind of nominal schedule for this study group. As Dean mentioned, every couple of weeks. There is one gap kind of down here in the end of May because there's a Memorial Day week in there. Like Dean mentioned, yeah, every other week, the kind of a capstone of this is working on 23rd is tentatively the date. That would be the Wednesday of that week. A session with David Loy, the author. And I've been in touch with David and know David pretty well through Rocky Mountain Ecodharma Retreat Center that he's one of the principal drivers of, as well as it turns out through Extinction Rebellion. That's actually where we met each other. Yeah, as Dean mentioned, the book, Ecodharma, that I'm sure everybody is familiar with now or has on order at least. And David, just for the record, let me try and move this piece of the display. Yeah, David is a Zen teacher. Okay, on his homepage, mentions, yeah, he started way back in the early 70s, is formally trained in a specific Zen tradition, and is is, like I said, an internationally known Zen teacher. My personal teacher happens to be a different fellow, this gentleman, Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche. I happen to, he's my teacher, so thereby I'm part of the Tibetan Buddhist world. As I mentioned, David is Zen, and at the level of Ecodharma, it's really, for those who know a little bit about Buddhism, it's really not biased towards Zen or insight or the Tibetan traditions. It's really kind of a very uniform across that, and basic enough that it doesn't specialize in the way that you can get more specialized, you get further into that. Sort of that bit about teachers. Here is nominally what I put together kind of as an outline for the first session. And what I thought we'd do is a good place to start with this, I think, is actually kind of the basic introduction to sitting meditation is me talking to somebody. It's also us doing things, kind of culminating with actually 5 minutes of us sitting. And we'll start each session in that way. I think that's a good thing to do to begin with. Wanted to do a round of introductions for everybody, and is highlighted on here was really a couple of things to highlight in that is, and we'll talk more about it at the time, is really how much experience you have with some kind of practice from some tradition or another, and also collapse awareness, because as the title of the book says, you know, in the Ecodharma, in times of ecological crisis. And so that's really one aspect of the book we'll be talking about in some fair detail. And I've got some material to kind of walk us through what the book covers at a very high level. Wanted to do that kind of as a discussion. That's why the intermixed with piece here. Because if we can kind of step through some of the topics and talk about it a little bit, I think that'll make it a little more interesting. So with that said, let me dive into, wanted to start with just kind of the basics of Buddhist sitting meditation, and apologies in advance to anybody who's already familiar with this. And so this is, you know, kind of already known and you know, and it would be a review for you. I think it's good to start here because part of the thing about Ecodharma is it's about the Dharma, and what the Dharma is about is basically, at one level at least, about sitting meditation. Now, on this slide, I tried to put together a few words, and I'll just talk at this stuff, of why do we do this? What's the point? The first line, as it says on there, I think at one level you can think of it as is a practice whose goal is to simply be here. And, you know, and traditionally, the term for it, and I'll try to not get too crazy, especially tonight, about terminology, is a synonym for calm abiding. So what we're really trying to do is build skills of concentration, which is about being able to focus and sustain that rather than have our attention just randomly scattered to, you know, whatever shiny object we saw last. Sensory clarity, which is really being clear about all of our experiences. Experiences with the body, experiences with feelings, experiences with thoughts, the whole thing. Third area is equanimity, which is kind of a fancy word and perhaps a little hard to explain, but I think a couple key points there really, versus being constantly stirred up, which is kind of the idea of, you know, our attention chasing the shiny object we saw last. The other part of equanimity is a little deeper, and it's really being at ease with how it is versus constantly the ego accepting and wanting to grasp or reject things. It's sort of coming to rest, and it's back to the calm abiding idea. And like it says, rest in how things are for you now, and having that be okay. Really want to develop into, you know, clarity and peace and so forth. This is really the cornerstone, and what I'm going to cover tonight is basic. It's common in my experience across all three aspects of the Buddhist world. There's tiny details and technique. We won't bother with a lot of that. It's a good place to start and build from here. The other key piece on this is those last couple of bullets. It's really about the experience of doing the practice. It's not about thinking anything in particular. We'll talk about that. Um, and it's not about conceptualization, it's about realization. Um, One of the things I threw in on this slide was a quote from Reverend Angel Kojo Williams, who is a Black female teacher, and talking about love and justice and so forth. And one of the things I want to do over the sessions is maybe spend on the order of 5 minutes a session, bringing in kind of additional aspects about meditation, maybe some very small specific practices from people like Reverend Angel, and other kind of contemporary Dharma practices that parallel Ecodharma. One of them is called Radical Dharma, which she and Reverend or Lama Rod, I'm forgetting his last name off the top of my head, have been very involved with and wrote the book on Radical Dharma. So we'll just bring in a couple ideas out of there because I think that helps enrich things. The place to start with sitting meditation is, I'm not going to go into tonight all the stuff about cushions and benches and cross-legged and all of that, because all of that is kind of not real fundamental, if you will. There's details there you can get into, you don't have to. The basic piece of this is sitting meditation starts with sitting, which is a physical activity. So it really is trying to sit up straight. Your spine, when it's relaxed, it takes the form of an S curve from your neck around your shoulders, back down your backbone, and then down at the lower backbone and the pelvis and all that. So really trying to get in to do the calm abiding, to just sit here involves just sitting here. And it's surprising how rarely we actually do that. There's a few details here. The shoulders relaxed, arms hang down, no leaning back, or it should be kind of a little strange. Most people probably wouldn't do that. It's amazing though how much of our life we spent hunched. We're leaning forward and our shoulders are rounded. And especially the Zen guys, some of them are real big on posture, posture, posture. So sit up straight, sit up regally, sit up confidently, and let your arms hang down. A little further down, we'll talk about the rest of the arms piece. The one thing about sitting is you can do it on a cushion or a bench or the front of a chair. You can't sit properly, as we mean the word sitting here, if you're seated all the way back in the chair. If your back is against the back of that chair, you're effectively leaning back too far. What you need to do is come forward so you can sit on the front edge of a chair. That works real well. If you do have benches or cushions or any of that kind of stuff that you're familiar with, by all means, go for it. Arms relaxed, hands roughly on the knees. That actually depends on the geometry of your arm. Not everybody's arms are equal in the proportion between from the elbow to the wrist and from the elbow to the shoulder. Point being, you want to let your arms just sit down, hang down naturally, not sticking your hands out forward, not pulling back too far, just in a natural, relaxed position. Head is, position, as it said, chin is just very slightly down. That's kind of a little bit of a detail. One thing that you won't see mentioned many places is if you have on blue jeans, it can be very helpful to pop the snap at the top and maybe move the zipper down just a tiny bit so the waistband is not constraining you. That's one that a lot of times get missed, but if you're sitting there with this corset around your middle, it kind of interferes with things. So that's kind of the basics of posture. And anybody jump in if you have any questions about any of this stuff. That's pretty much it for posture. Some more aspects of this. Gaze. There's really the issue of eyes open or eyes closed, or what exactly works for you. In general, I'd recommend eyes closed unless you're familiar with meditating with them open. That can vary person to person. If you do have them open, the whole point is soft gaze slightly downward, about 6 feet out. You're not looking at anything suspended in particular. And part of the whole thing about when you're really calmly sitting, your brain stops driving your eyes and they come completely to rest. Sitting practice turns a lot on the breath, and the basic method that's been taught for the last 2,500 years essentially is that you follow the breath, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. But the breath piece of it is you can breathe out your nostrils or your mouth. Either one's fine. The thing about this is you allow the breathing to be natural. You're not trying to control it in any way. You don't want to interfere with it. You don't want to try and breathe too hard, too shallow, hold your breath, any of that kind of stuff. Just let your breath be what it will be, because your body naturally knows how to breathe. And once you kind of step out of the way and let it, it will. As you get calmer, the breath will tend to get shallower and slower. Naturally happens. The body knows how to work all that stuff. Next topic down is tensions. If you have them, you can work with them as suggested here by kind of focusing on them and learning to relax in them. The other thing about tensions is you sit for a while. If you haven't done this before, occasionally you may get kind of a twitch. And I don't know how other people are, but for me, sometimes when I'm going to sleep, there'll be kind of this big twitch that's kind of I think of it as discharging a stored energy in my nervous system in preparation for the transition to sleep. You may have little twitches like that occasionally happen if you sit, especially at first, and especially if you get to sitting for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. And that's a very natural thing, because we store a lot of tensions in various parts of our body, and we kind of hold them in there, and we hold it in there rigidly because we're holding things rigidly because our mind is busy holding things rigidly. And if we kind of unwind all that a little bit, tensions will naturally get relieved. And then that commonly happens. Yes, like I said, every detail is important here, because you really are trying to clear the energy, the excess energy in a way, of the body, and calm the mind and allow the whole system to kind of settle. Mind. What you basically do is place your attention on your breath, especially the out breath. Essentially, what you're doing is watching yourself breathe. You can count the breaths if you like to, don't have to. While you're doing that, there's all sorts of things that'll come up in mind. That's what's in this section. All sorts of thoughts and feelings might arise. They typically will. And no matter kind of what they are, that's okay. That's okay. The real point of this practice is to let them arise, dwell, and cease, because they'll naturally do all three of those. We don't try and suppress them. We don't try and turn them off. But the counterbalance on that is you try not to get lost in them in the usual way we do of just getting, off into the weeds we go with what we're thinking about. So when you notice you're no longer focused on your breath, or aware maybe would be a better word in that sentence, and getting lost in thoughts or feelings, you can simply come back to the breath, to noticing the breath. A very interesting technique specifically for doing that is to kind of use thinking against itself. So when you notice you're lost in thoughts, you surface the thought thinking, just the one word. That has a useful thing. It kind of pops the bubble of the runaway thoughts, because all of a sudden thinking, and then, woof, oh, yeah, now I am back here. And now I am looking at my breath again. And that's the basics of it. It's just that simple. Perhaps astoundingly, but and like I said, you can count breaths and do things like that, but just learning to sit and be with your breath. And the other thing I guess to say at this point is it really is kind of a combination of in some of the Deep Academy material talking about 5 bodies. It really is, just to kind of highlight a tiny bit of that, it really is my physical body is sitting. It knows how to breathe, knows how to make its heart work, knows how to monitor, control temperature, the whole 9 yards. I don't have to do anything consciously about it. I can ask it to hold its breath, and it'll oblige for a while until it decides that it wants to start breathing again, and I will then be incapable of stopping it. You can't do likewise with your heart, I would observe. So there's the body, there's the mind, there's the feelings. For sure, all three of those are going to get involved in this. And that's where it's good to be grounded in the body, in the breathing of the body. That's the way to think of it, I think, is that I'm sitting here supported by what I'm sitting on, supported by the earth. And the more I can just come to rest, ultimately on the earth, the more that's what this is all about. A couple of other notes, and if you're new to this, try to practice regularly is a really good thing. Like a great many things, if you're trying to learn piano, for example, practicing regularly would be a very good thing. Every day is ideal, but 5 days out of 7 isn't bad. It certainly doesn't have to be every day. And for beginners, sitting 5 minutes is probably good for a week at least. Then you can start adding maybe 5 minutes every week or two onto that. By the way, for reference for people new to this stuff, a full meditation session is, depending on your tradition, 35 to 45 minutes. As is noted there. After that, you typically need to get up and walk around. If you get more than, I didn't write this down in here, but if you get more than 20 minutes, there's a couple of details we can talk about in later sessions about, depending on your posture, the real advantage of sitting on the edge of a chair is you can sit there for 35 or 45 minutes uninterrupted and not have any problems. If you're on a cushion, there's some other details I won't go into more in a moment. For longer sessions in Buddhist practice, what's typically done is 45 minutes of sitting and 15 minutes of walking meditation and so forth. It's noted on here, what's next. After a while, you will become a little calmer. It'll take a little bit, but it has an impact, and it has an impact not just when you're on the cushion, but more generally. And then final thing that I did want to mention, and I think in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, especially, there's a tradition of pith instructions, basically very poignant, not intellectual, but very pointed kind of commentary about things. One of them I want to share from my teacher, Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche, is that first and foremost, don't be hard on yourself. We're so conditioned in this society to be that way and evaluate ourselves and judge ourselves and all of that. And then we apply that to other people as well, of course. And this is an opportunity to kind of turn some of that stuff off, or at least minimize it a little bit. That is to say, there's no wrong way to do this. And if you get lost in your thoughts and at first that seems to be a good part of what's going on, that's fine. Just return to breathing, noticing your breathing. If it takes up all the time and you kind of get to the very end and go, wow, 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever just went by, and boy, I was just lost in thinking and planning and doing all that, great. Because if you do it tomorrow, you'll have another opportunity tomorrow to see how it is then. So you don't have to be hard on yourself about this time. You really can't do this wrong if you come and sit and do it. And that's why that final point is, sometimes, things can get kind of crazy. If you start having stuff surface, that can be a little bit interesting. Feelings come up, sometimes intense feelings. But if you gain experience with this and gain familiarity with being grounded, like I say, in the breath, in the body, on the earth, you got it. That's the deal. So that's the basics of that. What I'd propose we do, let me check time here. Yeah, we're good. Is if folks are willing to entertain it, let's just sit together for 5 minutes and sort of see how that goes. Find yourself a position, get settled. Sometimes you need to rock a little bit to kind of, find a nice comfortable spot. As one teacher I know says, be kind to your body. sit in a way that's kind to it. Sit here for a bit. Like I said, we can close our eyes. And what I'll do is I'll do the timing, and I happen to have a gong. So I will ring it to start, and I will ring it in 5 minutes. And if we can just sit in silence. That part of the video is going to be boring as it can be for people to watch. I'll add just a couple notes. As you sit, you can observe the breath coming out of the nostrils or out of the mouth. Just notice it flowing out. Much like a tide pool near the ocean, with the ocean gently coming in and bringing in nutrients and things that all the life in the tide pool needs, and then flowing back out, taking away all that isn't needed anymore. hopefully the audio of the gong comes through on Zoom. Sometimes they have filters and things. That was about 5 minutes. Doesn't have to be precise. And I guess it may be one other thing to say just real quick about this too, is that the basics of sitting, even though it comes from the Buddhist tradition, by no means do you have to be a Buddhist to do this, take advantage of it, or benefit from it. Regardless your spiritual orientation and path and all of that, whether you've got one or don't have one in particular even, this stuff can benefit. Like I say, I want to do just a few minutes of this each session just to kind of arrive and have a way of arriving and settling. And the great thing about this kind of practice is if there's thoughts that come up about what happened during the day or plans for tomorrow or all the usual kind of things that arise in the mind, just let them arise, notice it, let it go away, let go of it. Because any single thought does not last very long if you look at it close. With all that said, let me switch gears here and let's spend a few minutes. How many participants do we have online? Let me see if I can get the view going here.
There are 10 of us, including you and me.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's do a round of everybody just kind of introducing themselves. Well, let's say 2 minutes each. That would work.
And Tim, would you stop your share screen so we can get a group picture going?
Yeah, there you go.
And this would be a good time if you have that choice on your device to go to gallery view so you can see the other folks.
Yes,
that are here.
That's what I was trying to do. Oh yeah, thank you. Yes, yeah. And when you get screen sharing going on, yeah, cool. So yeah, if we just go around, maybe since I got the floor, I'll just start real quick. As Dean mentioned, my name is Tim Remple. I've known Dean for a few years. We met back in the spring of 2018 in a seminar he and Carolyn Baker were doing. My background is come to the collapse aware world from spending a couple of 3 years in the near-term human extinction realm, Guy McPherson and crew. So pretty intensely aware of collapse coming, and it's just kind of a question of how soon is soon and how complete is complete. Have been, as Dean mentioned, I'm formally a Buddhist, have been that for, coming up on 30 years now. Have known my teacher, Zigar Kongtra Rinpoche, for 25. I've been practicing with him and his community of students. Here in Colorado is where I'm happen to be located mainly, but he has centers internationally and all. I'm trying to think of anything else that's relevant. Yeah, like I say, definitely very, very collapse aware. I'm fortunate to know Dar Jamail and helped him a little bit with some of his work when he was writing with Truth Out. And it's just, keeping up with the oncoming stream of news out of the Arctic, out of, various collapse of all sorts. Just seems like a never-ending stream of things that if you pay close attention, you can see is occurring, but you will not, of course, hear about it in the U.S. media and all that because they don't want to talk about it. So let me be quiet there, and if someone wants to go next, that would be lovely.
I'll go. I'm Gavin. I live in Seattle. I have been probably collapse aware at least for the last 40 years to differing degrees, sometimes fully immersed in what's happening, other times in complete denial about what's happening, or at least numb to it. And I came to this community of practice because I'd hit a wall of grief and I didn't know how to get through it. And I started looking around just online for people that were having these kind of conversations. So that's how I got connected to Living Resilience and Deep Academy. And I've done a couple of those courses and I'm now in the community of practice. So that's why I'm here. Molly.
Nice one. My currently living in Southwest Utah. I'm an artist and an educator, and make paintings that are abstractions from landscape. And these ideas are really like filtering in, and I'm seeking ways of expressing. I think I came to some of these ideas, you know, my dad is a big reader. He was a librarian. And I think when I was 16, he had left an article up on the computer. I think it might've been Guy McPherson. And I just remember feeling like a horror in my body that I didn't know how to process or I didn't understand. It was like the first time I had, like, this idea had become conceivable to me. And, you know, I think I've been on a slow track since then to kind of find communities that where people can speak about this openly. And I guess I come to it through like Joanna Macy and Carolyn Baker and some of those folks. Bill.
Okay, thank you, Molly. My name is Bill, and I live in a suburb of Atlanta, and I am retired. I'm a grandfather of 5 grandchildren who live here locally, and they are part of the focus for me when it comes to figuring out how to live in a collapsing planet that we are all part of. I came to this through Michael Dowd and his post-doom conversations online, and that's how I connected with Dean and Living Resilience. And it corresponded with just about the beginning of the pandemic, which has been an opportunity for me during this pause to kind of do some of this inner work and figuring stuff out as to the best way to comport ourselves, I think would be the term, into the future that we all share. So how about Jeff? Would you like to go?
Sure. My name's Jeff. I'm from southern New Jersey, close to Philadelphia. And yeah, like a lot of you guys, well, I discovered Guy McPherson's work probably about 5 years ago, and, you know, went through a lot of grieving, and basically Buddhism is, I think, the main thing that's getting me past the grief, or helping me, you know, actually grieve and not like have it destroy me. And I mean, it's basically, I was like, well, you know, let me do what I've kind of always wanted to do in a way. I'm basically an aspiring artist now, and aspiring like permaculture, you know, try to grow as much food as my own food as I can. And you know, just not really sure. I mean, you know, it there's a good chance it's probably too late for us, but for me, it became about just living just as authentically as I can, just because that's what feels right for me, you know. So I just I mean, the system is just so toxic for everyone. I mean, I had to get out of it. I mean, not that I'll be out of it forever necessarily, but I feel like I'm called to go down this path and just, stay on the Dharma and basically what this book is about, and just see where this takes me. So that's about it. Let's see who hasn't gone yet. Tim.
Yeah, I'm Tim from Southern
I'm
Vermont.
not sure who else hasn't gone yet.
Did you call on me, Jeff?
Yes, he did. Go ahead, Tim.
Okay. I've been an activist and community organizer all my life, going back to the civil rights and draft.
Yeah, sorry, I think I have a delay.
Yeah, Jeff, you do, and it might be good for you to just sign out and then come back in if that works for you. Otherwise, yes, you do have a substantial delay. So, and I'm sorry, Tim, please go ahead.
Okay. I was saying that I've been an activist and community organizer all my life, basically full time. I have been a climate organizer and since the turn of the century. Very involved in southern Vermont in a lot of projects that are designed to make us a little more survivable. I have been a practicing meditator since 1970 in the Vipassana tradition. I don't know. What else you want to know? Oh, everyone's talking about collapse. Yeah. The whole notion of the whole understanding of collapse. Again, Guy McPherson was very instrumental, and I read a book of his. And it's funny how I'm part of an Ecodharma group back in southern Vermont. In fact, we're reading David Loy for the second time because we've got some new people on board. And it's really interesting that this is a group of people who really haven't accepted collapse up until very recently. And I don't know whether it was because David came and visited with us, a few months ago, or what, but there was definitely a corner that was turned. And I found that I was able to talk with people in a way that I hadn't before. I feel that Buddhist people in general that I've known, I don't know whether this is true across the board, have generally been very uninvolved with the collapsing climate. And that's been very frustrating to me, especially in the area that I live in. Okay, Rebecca.
I'm Rebecca, and I just moved to Asheville, North Carolina, actually, which is a pretty neat area to be in, from Florida. And I have been very immersed in all of this, the notion of what's happening with our world for about 15, 20 years now. And I'm a psychotherapist. I've been a psychotherapist all my adult life. So I'm very interested in inner work and the role that inner work plays during this time in our history. I've been very involved in the transition movement, and particularly involved in the inner transition. And I love how permaculture speaks about the invisible structures as well as the visible structures. And Buddhism has always been attractive to me. And I meditate regularly. So I was really drawn to doing this book study because I am going through a period of time right now where I'm just not sure what to believe anymore or what role to play in my life anymore. And I want to just try to derive wisdom from that tradition and from David Loy, and just see where I'm at, what I discover during this period of transition for me. Gavin?
I already went. I'm going to call on Patricia Fay. Is that how you say it?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm in McMinnville, Oregon. I'm a 76-year-old activist, grandma. Got active in 1966 when I was a Peace Corps volunteer down in Guyana in South America. And I came home to all the demonstrations of the Vietnam War and marched and led marches and got tear gassed and did all that in my hippie days. And throughout my life, I guess I would say I've been most informed by landmark education, science of mind. What else? I started doing Vipassana meditation in the early 90s and have maintained that practice. Currently, I would say that my passion is this book, See No Stranger, Valerie Carr and her work. I'm in 2 book groups on this right now. And also, Rebecca, you mentioned the inner work. I am just starting to read the inner work of racial justice by Rhonda McGee. And so for me as well, I'm an ordained minister in the New Thought tradition, and I feel like the grief work, the inner work that we're all being called to do is the thing that's going to allow us to really shift into the more beautiful world that we know is possible, as Charles Eisenstein likes to say. He's also one of my heroes right now. I got certified back in 2010 to lead the Pachamama Alliance programs, starting with Awakening the Dreamer and more recently their drawdown programs. So I facilitated all those programs here in this little town of McMinnville, Oregon. And, that's about it for me. I was drawn to come to this because I have a really good friend here who's a Buddhist and loves David Loy. And when I found out that we were doing David Loy's book here, I just thought I would come and check out and see what everybody's up to. And so I'm enjoying meeting you all. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody who has not checked
Yeah,
in?
I think you're the last one, Dean.
Okay.
Alice.
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 Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Kenny.
Hello. I'm kind of multitasking here. In fact, I'm going to leave to go to an in-person meeting in a few minutes, but I definitely intend to at least watch all the videos and hopefully participate some. Guy McPherson and Carolyn Baker, and a couple of years ago, a little over 2 years ago, I came and participated in a workshop that Dean held in Ashland. I mostly have been working with babies, but that all stopped with COVID, with the shutdowns and all. And I've got grandkids, so I'm very concerned about how to relate to children and new mothers with new babies and all. And I was actually just about to, and Pachamama Alliance, I also used to, there was a group of us that were doing those presentations. I was just about to facilitate a Joanna Macy work that reconnects workshop when COVID shut everything down. So anyway, it looked like a really good book, and I thought it would be. I've started reading it. I'm halfway through chapter 1. Thought it would be really good to connect with other people that are reading it too. That's all. Thanks.
Great. Thank you,
And
Alice.
I'm shy of being looked at, so I don't have my
Okay.
video on. But maybe I will later.
Good to have you here, Alice. What I could add to what I mentioned at the very beginning is I've been very, very collapse aware for a little over 50 years now, getting my eyes opened wide by a guy named Jacques Cousteau, who showed me that we were doing immense damage under the surface of the ocean. And I noticed that there was not a single adult in my life that listened when he talked about that. And none of them shed a tear. And that was my first sign that this isn't going to go well. With meditation, I have also had quite a few lineages that I've given a few years to each of them, and have since come up with my own hybrid, which is far more of an embodied and involves motion and intentful practices within the meditation experience, in addition to having a sitting practice. And I'm just really pleased to be a part of this for the reasons that I mentioned at the very beginning. This is really an opportunity to hear far more of what Tim is always so generous to contribute, no matter what group I'm in. So I'm really glad to be exposed to more of what Tim has to offer. And also, this will be my first time reading a full book by David Loy, and I'm very excited about that as well. And it's always such a privilege to be with kindred spirits in this kind of setting. I'm really feeling honored to be with y'all. You know, as each of you is checking in, I don't take it for granted, because there are many, many people in my life that do not have this level of intent and focus that you have shared. So I see that, and I appreciate that. And I think it's back to you, Tim.
Yeah, let me just sort of second what you just said, Dean, and welcome to everyone, and thank you for being here. And it's really, I'm really impressed, to be honest, and honored to be with a group that's diverse, brings as much depth as many of you do. Some of you have been practicing for literally many decades. It's just way cool and way wonderful. Yeah, with the time, we've got about half an hour left. The structure of the book, let me put up one more screen share. The book is divided into a number of chapters, and in one of the slides I showed earlier was kind of the outline, and basically the structure of this whole thing is, doing a chapter every 2 weeks. And happily, all the chapters are about the same size, so that's very convenient. The intro to the book is sort of a summary of the chapters, and what I did was I put together some slides for that. We won't have time to go over all of them, and that's fine, because the further out sessions are further out, and we'll get there. I thought what would be interesting tonight, maybe in the half hour we have, is to do just the first couple, perhaps 3 slides out of this that talk about not the intro chapter of the book, but kind of the meat, starting with the situation. And that's where I think this slide's interesting. What I did was kind of put together here an amalgam of points from the intro chapter about the situation chapter in here. A couple of things added of my own. As is mentioned on here, deep adaptation in Dean's book provide one baseline, and this is kind of another, in a sense, that especially the situation piece of the kind of stark reality piece, if you will. And one of the things that, definitely David talks about in the book is that it's not only, climate change in kind of a narrow sense of it, but really that there's, the list goes on and on, as I was alluding to earlier, that, in Dar's work, you read his book, End of Ice, and it's just amazing, chapter after chapter of different aspects of this, because there really is, ecological, biosphere, Arctic, oceans I didn't put down on there, that wouldn't be another big one. And, kind of the situation that we face in being collapse aware is really understanding that, things don't look good on any of those fronts. The science is, scientists, especially population biologists and people like that, which, by the way, is the background McPherson comes from, is people who study organisms in environments and ecosystems and all of that, are convinced that we're in the sixth mass extinction by virtue of just how fast species are going extinct. 10x, 100x, I forget what, large multiple times what would be the background rate of extinction. I think of, like, with relative to Paul Chifurka's 5-level scale that you may be familiar with, of kind of levels of collapse awareness. The top level being that it really is a predicament, again, as McPherson talks about, and a predicament being something that's it's not a solvable problem per se. And as noted on here, we are in a world of hurt, and maybe worse than that. One aspect that he talks about a little bit, and we will cover in the sessions in some fair depth in places, is what I put down on here is the dark night of the soul, really the whole grief aspect of this. If I have a criticism of Paul's stuff, it's not that any of it's wrong or bad, it's that he stops the story about midway through. In my view, it's like once you get to the predicament and once you realize how screwed we are, that's all in here. That tends to all be in the head. Once that realization sinks into the heart, then a whole nother phase of this opens up, and really dealing with grief. And so that, grief will be kind of one thread that weaves through bits of this, and we'll come back to over and over. Mentioned about the rate of change. One of the core themes and it's interesting to me, it parallels between Dean's work and David's, is basically this level of disconnection or isolation, and hence the need to be reconnected, because we think we're isolated or disconnected from nature, from the natural world. And, I don't know about you guys, but so much of kind of a current situation in the world, and thinking, just to cite an example, a concrete example to me that's just utterly absurd, is to think that somehow we can go to Mars. Well, I'm not sure we're going to take 8 billion people. I'm not sure we're going to have food on Mars. We're so disconnected from nature, it's just insane. Another aspect that David brings up in the book is, and you'll see it really parallels, if you've read Dar's book, The End of Ice, the last chapter in there, it really kind of parallels that. And we'll talk about that in some depth too, because it's, what can you do once you understand, once you're grieving, and now what do we do? And that's where it's excellent that, in doing the round of introductions, there was mention of, a couple times, I think, of Joanna Macy's work, because that is mentioned in places in the book as well. And that's where the Standing Rock resistant solidarity, common humanity, I think, is emerging as an awareness of, we really are kind of all in this together. in a really profound way. That as we kind of come to realize more and more, I don't know about your experience, but to me personally, it makes some of the political divisions and some of that just seem sort of silly in a way that, you know, you can get caught up in this very superficial, in a sense, kind of thing. Whereas there's this very fundamental and profound transformation going on in the world of the world, and, you know, everything that lives on the earth. And in comparison to political stuff, just, you know, to me sometimes seems almost irrelevant. Yeah, I don't know. That's my personal take on it. The next point there too, that David being from the Zen tradition, there's emphasis placed in that tradition on what's called not knowing mind, which is to say, if you really look at the situation, you know, I don't know what's going to happen to me, any of you folks, the rest of the world, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. And the further out it gets, the more uncertain I am about that. If it was 10 years out, a whopping lot can happen in 10 years, both good, bad, and every point in between. And so from a Zen perspective, this whole notion of not knowing mind is essentially the idea that, you know, we can speculate and we can be concerned, and rightly so, like I say on the slide, enraged even. There's times that there's outrage, and I do want to bring in just a tiny little bit in places along Rod's material about love and rage, and being a Black Buddhist male puts you in a very interesting position in this society, to summarize. But, you know, the fundamental thing about not knowing mind is we don't know. We really don't know. And that's where, as David puts it, things look bleak. And the more you look at it, the bleaker they look. And certainly the news seems to be almost 90% bleak and maybe 10% positive, if that. So, you know, it's not like it's 50-50, and it's not like it's getting better or seemingly getting better. But it's kind of back to the thing, you know, with me mentioning near-term human extinction, is how near is near? In geological times, 100,000 years is near. In terms of human history, 100,000 years is a very long time. So, thank you. Yeah, let me kind of pause there for a second to see, do that. You know, people jump in. Was anything on that slide kind of a surprise in terms of the situation? Are there aspects that, you know, strike any of you as more forcefully, I guess, than others? Just want to kind of open up to a little bit of discussion here.
There were two things you said. Am I open here?
Yes. Oh, now you're muted. Other way around.
One, a little point. You're right that politics are irrelevant. They are also very symptomatic of our decline, of our demise. I feel like that's really not something to be just dismissed because it is so irrelevant to our lives. It is very symptomatic of our collapse. And the other thing is so liberating because we don't know. And I feel like very often with myself, I have found myself tumbling into despair and grief about the future. I don't know anything about that. And I think in terms of practice, that's something to really focus on, the fact that we don't know. And are we causing ourselves unnecessary amounts of despair and grief by projecting into the future what we think is going to be? And I feel like trying to live much more today in this moment is a healthier way, not only for now, but perhaps for the future. I mean, as good old Thich Nhat Hanh said, that's the future has been formed in the present. Those weren't his words. They were my variation of it. And I think there's real truth to that, to really be aware of, are we going down paths that are not real? Yeah, life is, we can focus right now on life. We can focus on what is happening in our towns, with the climate. And we can do things that are very energizing and very positive. Yeah, they may be blown away tomorrow with tomorrow's hurricane. That's, but that could always happen anytime. The thing is, as Joanne Macy, to pick on her, she says that hope is grounded in action, in doing something, not in the future, because the only time you do something is in the present, but doing something. And I'd like to really at some time really focus on that, because David Lloyd focuses on that.
Yeah.
That is something that he very strongly believes in. In fact, he believes a Buddhist practice is not just the inner work, but is also what we're doing out in the world. And so activism is a very key part to this, which so seldom gets talked about when we talk about collapse. We talk about grief, we talk about despair, we talk how bad it's going to be for our children and grandchildren. And I really question whether that's a Buddhist way, if you will, to approach this issue. So anyway, I'm running off at the mouth, and I'll shut up.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments, Tim. And yeah, one of the other themes that'll come out through this is, and is very prominent in David's work and the last chapter in Durr's book and a lot of other places, and in Joanna Macy's work, I think too, that I'm a little less familiar with myself, is that, yeah, is you do things and you let go of the outcome, because you can't know what's going to come of it and what's going to come of it in the future. But what I do know is I'm here today, and if I can do things today, then I can do things today. And that might be a good thing to do today, and then let each day kind of unfold. As you were saying that too, Tim, the other thing that struck me was, yeah, the Joanna Macy's thing about hope is grounded in action. And if you will, the corollary, the inverse of that is perhaps despair is grounded in inaction. And when it seems like, I don't know about you folks, but at least with me, when it seems like there's nothing you can do, that's when you kind of have a tendency to start falling down the rabbit hole of, boy, it's looking bleak and I'm pulling the rabbit hole in over me. And, this is tough. Yeah. And next week or next session, I should say, we'll go over that chapter. And I think there's some good material there.
And Tim, you had a hand from Patricia Fay.
Right.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. So there's something I want to say about inner work again, and the value of that, not like opposed to action, but I think when we as individuals get ourselves in a frenzy about the action we're doing, that we may be defeating the purpose of creating peace or harmony or whatever. I mean, unless it's taken me a lifetime to get to this, but I now know that unless I'm centered, unless I know kind of who I am, who we are, unless I feel that kind of upsurging of gratitude inside myself for my life. I mean, unless I have that when I go out and wave my signs or go to the commissioners meeting or do whatever it is that I try to do here in this little town, you know, I'm way more effective when I've had a hot bath and meditated and had a good meal and have really loved myself and taken care of myself. And I just want to say that I think that that's something that this community of people, we don't do enough of. We don't do enough of loving ourselves and really taking care of ourselves. I mean, it's a political action to love ourselves, you guys, right?
Indeed. Well said. Well said. Yeah, and that and what you say is actually, Patricia Fay, is actually a perfect segue. Let me put up one more slide. That's kind of what the next chapter in the book is about, and we can talk about this one a little bit because it gets exactly to what some of the stuff you're talking about, and that's where this chapter is really, I think, is a really good chapter because it's basically in the book once David's presented sort of the situation and the stark aspect of that and all, and the fact that it's just not climate is the whole thing, and part of it's, to put it one way, it's as much as in our heads as it is in the world. And maybe the world is actually a reflection of what's in our heads. You know, then he kind of goes into, in the next chapter, into really kind of an overview of Buddhism and Ecodharma. And I thought I'd put this up because this is kind of the key points on this, you know, of this chapter. And when we go over it, as I mentioned in the last bullet, for those who aren't familiar with Buddhism, I'll try and fill in a little bit of background, explain a little bit of terminology, you know, kind of level set everybody that way, so that, you know, everybody has common understanding. You know, because David's book, while I wouldn't call it written exclusively for Buddhists, I think it's also fair to say that it does assume at least a little bit of a background understanding and familiarity with Buddhism. In the sense that it's not a tutorial book about that. It's not an introductory book about that. So, so the need for filling in that gap, if you will. You know, he talks about in that chapter that, yeah, historically, you know, the whole point of Buddhism, for those who aren't real familiar with it, is in a nutshell, it's focused on individual suffering, what causes that, and what you can do about it. And very much individual, not collective. There's a couple of competing thoughts from the Buddhist world about how to relate to the world, and as I tried to allude to in that second bullet, the one side of that debate is basically that we want to be separate from the world. We're not concerned about the world. We're busy with our practice. We're busy with pursuing our individual path. We're busy with trying to wake up individually. And so pretty otherworldly kind of orientation. An extreme example of that in the Buddhist world is the Pure Land philosophies out of certain parts of Zen in Japan, of course, that really are about another realm, that if you do good in this life, you'll end up in that better other realm next. The absolute opposite of that is the this worldly bunch that says what we need to do is use the philosophies and approach of Buddhism, if you will, to be in the world, to better fit into it. And that's where the arrow and then the quotes is literally text out of David's book. That what he argues for, and it's really elegant, I think, is part of the thing about Buddhism is it's so-called the philosophy of the middle way. I'll just reference that, and over the sessions we'll maybe touch on that a little bit and you begin to understand what that's about. It's essentially not being in the two extremes, and that's why he says instead of trying to transcend this world, escape it, or fit into it better, we can awaken and experience the world. And that middle way is, I think, a very Buddhist approach to this. He talks about in there that the whole, at one level, the part, as the next bullet down talks about, is meditation is really about deconstructing in some very real way all the habitual, conditioned stuff, and Lord knows in this society, we're so conditioned and so habitual, it's just crazy town. And by the way, the being hard on yourself piece I mentioned earlier in the pith instruction, my teacher, Contra Rinpoche, teaches all over the world. And he says it's bad in the West in general, and it's probably worst in the United States and perhaps Australia. You guys are just so insanely hard on yourself. And to your point, Patricia Fay, about loving yourself. It's a little hard to be loving yourself when you're busy criticizing yourself damn near nonstop from the moment you wake up in the morning to the moment you go to sleep at night, and sometimes in your dreams to boot, you know. Next point down is one of the things that David really punches home in the chapter is that, you know, our bodies are of the earth. We're rooted in the biological, physical aspects of the earth, and we're not separate from that. And, you know, we, again, in this society, we somehow think we can exist. For example, if, you know, the whole thing that I'm personally concerned with is if the biosphere collapses and human agriculture becomes impossible, how the devil are we going to begin to feed 8 billion people? That could be extremely difficult. So we're not separated from nature as much as our technology and all would have us think we are. Next one down is kind of David's definition of what Ecodharma is, which is a new term that's arisen in the last 10, maybe 20 years, something like that. It really kind of 3 key points in this. And again, Patricia Fay, you hit on one of them, I think, too, is in terms of activism, that if all you have is activism and you don't have any support underneath that on the inside, if you will. I was involved before the COVID stuff with XR fairly extensively, especially in Colorado. And if all you've got is the activism and nothing to support it, it's real easy to burn out, get cynical, you know, et cetera. Just kind of, you know, basically burn out and drop out of being active.
Add to the problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, and please do jump in at any point here. Yeah, and that's where his point about Ecodharma is by practicing in nature, which is really getting back to the roots of Buddhism. By the way, for those who don't know the history, the Buddha attained what's called enlightenment. I think it's a sad fact of history that in the 1800s, the Germans who were translating the original text were influenced by the Enlightenment and so chose that word. He woke up, because literally Buddha is in Sanskrit, it's a reference to I'm awake, is literally what that means. No notion about enlightenment or any kind of fancy stuff at all. Just very simple, I'm awake. And he did that in nature. There's a very famous tree in India that, you know, purportedly the tree he awoke under is still there. You can go visit it. And Loy is big on one key aspect of Ecodharma is getting back to practice in nature. You know, it's great to do it inside. It's comfortable. I'm sitting in the mountains in Colorado. It would be very difficult to practice outside right now, especially, you know, after dark. It'd be cold. But we've become so divorced from nature that in our Dharma practice, it's good to try and bring nature back into that. To explore eco implications of the Buddhist teachings, and then embody that as eco activism. And that's where I think this is really dovetails just beautifully with Dean's stuff about reconnection, in particular, reconnecting with earth or nature, whatever exact word you want to use for that, and deeper self. This is a kind of practice that if you put some form of meditation together and practice in nature, then you really, that opens it up a lot, I guess is one way to say that. And it really facilitates that reconnection. And the other thing that I think of is a key piece of that is also it facilitates the realization that nature is everywhere. I'm never actually outside of it. I can't be. I'm air breathing. I can't be outside the atmosphere of this planet. I can't go out into space as I am. That wouldn't begin to work, you know, that kind of thing. was curious, additional thoughts people had about some of this, because I think that's a good chunk. And like I say, Patricia, that just I had to put this slide up because it really dovetails so beautifully with some of the stuff you were saying.
You know, I used to read Deepak Chopra. I mean, I tried to read every book he ever wrote, and then I just I don't know, it was like he was always like too ethereal, but I tell you what, recently I have been listening to some stuff he's doing on the internet and looking again at how, you know, if you look at who we are, our true nature is not in form. You know, he talks about the nature of reality and bringing it, I don't know if this is Buddhist or not, but bringing it all back down to the atomic, subatomic place where there's nothing there. You know, it's all empty space, right?
Yes.
And so if we could start, I mean, I've really started to bring this into my practice every day, is I wrote down all the Sanskrit words for every day. He has a different Sanskrit word for every day, and it's all having to do with our true nature, you know, celebrating the dance of the cosmos. I am the universe, the source of it all. Everything that's happening, everything that looks like it's happening out there is actually inside of me. So it returns us to a sense of access to power to actually create our own reality. Now, if this is way beyond what we want to talk about, I understand, but I just wanted to bring that up because it's present in my life right now.
Yeah, some of that is actually covered in the next chapter in the book, the one after kind of the overview of Buddhism and Ecodharma, and then there's a chapter that goes kind of a good bit deeper and starts to talk to some of that stuff. Yeah, I think in the interest of time and keeping track of that, I notice we're getting near the bottom of the hour here. And I think maybe this is a good stopping point because, like I say, it's just such a wonderful lead, and I really appreciate that, Patricia, because sometimes things fortuitously arise that way. Maybe if we just want to do a quick round of checking out for this evening, and I'll go first. I just very, very much thank you. Very much appreciate the opportunity to do this, the opportunity to be here with you, what everybody brings. This is marvelous.
You want to pick somebody?
Molly.
Yeah, just same, like, thank you to everybody for the time and the thoughts and the ideas. I guess the one thing that kind of surfaced for me that I didn't get to say was one of my favorite quotes from The End of Ice was that quote. He quotes Václav Havel, and it's, you know, like, the hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the belief that it's worth doing no matter how it turns out. So, Gavin.
I just really want to thank Tim for doing this and Dean for helping, and it's opening up another place to have these conversations. I mean, reading the book is important, but also I think there's connecting and work that's being done within and outside of that at the same time. And I really value that. So thank you all. Jeff.
Yeah, I just also want to thank Tim and everyone. I have lots of thoughts with everything everyone's saying, and then I just forget them. So I'll have to take notes next time. Yeah, I'm just looking forward to this. Hopefully I don't have too many internet problems. It seems like I always have some kind of delay or something, but you know, we'll see what happens. I guess I'll go to Tim again next.
Tim, I don't know if you heard, Jeff was just passing it to you for a couple of words of checking out for this evening.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, it's okay. There you go.
Jeff asked it last time and I didn't hear it. Anyway, I'd like to conclude with a statement from David Loy, who talks about the importance of social engagement and makes this critical statement, critical in my estimation. The engaged bodhisattva path provides what each needs because it involves a double practice, inner and outer. You can't just, they're like, they go together. And as we've been saying, it would be wrong to overemphasize either one as the way. It's together, the inner work and the outer work.
Tim, would you mind mentioning which book is that?
This is the David Loy's Ecodharma.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Page 169.
Okay.
Okay, Bill, did you go yet? No.
No, I haven't. I'm not as far along as page 169 yet, but I have done the introduction and summary. So this evening's session was appropriate, I guess, reviewing what I just read. And as has been expressed here, I look forward to the conversation that can accompany reading the book, hopefully to make that that much more richer of an experience. I'm looking forward to it. Let's see, is anybody? Rebecca, are you still with us?
Can we see hands of anybody else who has not yet checked out? Patricia Fay, you want to go?
Sure. I guess what I want to say is just thank you to Dean and Tim and Molly and Gavin and Tim and Jeff and Bill and Rebecca. Y'all could have been doing a lot of other things with this time. And you came here to be in this conversation. You know, I know for myself, I didn't really come to engage. I sort of looked and saw that I had it on my calendar and I wasn't quite sure what it was going to be like. And I came on board and Tim was talking about how to meditate and I'm all judgmental and thinking, I don't do this. I've been meditating for eons. And what is this going to be about? And where's the agenda? And you know, all that bullshit,
All that stuff.
right? And yet now at the end, I feel related to each of you. I feel appreciative to each of you. And I just am feeling very grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patricia Fay. And Rebecca, are you there by any chance? We're just checking out. Looks like maybe no, and I'll go. I have so much resonance with each of the checkouts that you've shared. And what comes to me on top of that is, you know, I asked a guy named Joe Brewer, who's a kind of a futurist and a designer of systems. And I asked him, what would a person need to come prepared with in order to participate in one of your projects, this kind of way of living together in a new way? And he said, psychological flexibility and advanced self-regulation skills. And I interpreted the latter as advanced self-regulation and co-regulation skills. And I've integrated that into a huge amount of the work that we do in this living resilience stuff. And for me, it's very much like you just said, Patricia Fay. I really just felt tonight a sense of co-regulation, you know, and it was really just in the presence. Because it's, you know, mostly Tim talking tonight, and I know it won't be like that each time. and for the small amount of time that each of us have shared, I also feel very connected. And so I think there's a really rich vein of self and co-regulation skills and experience to have here. So I thank you for that. For those who are watching this as a recording, you've already got that figured out. For any of you, if you have any question about how to access the recordings or any other technical aspect of this course, and really any part of the content as well, anything about content, I will relay to Tim. And if, we'll talk, Tim and I will talk, and we'll set up the best way for you to contact either of us with whatever questions you have from here out. Please don't hesitate. We want to make this as intuitive and as easy as possible so that you can really put your attention where it belongs. So thank you very much. And Tim, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say to wrap it up.
Again, thank you. And yeah, Tim mentioned the Ecodharma path, and yes, in due turn, at about page 130 something, we will get into that. And that's something I so look forward to. He's going through this book, because knowing David well for a while now, he's just such an amazing person. What he has in the book is so great, and going through it with all of you, I think is going to be a heck of an experience. And then, like I mentioned at the very beginning, the capstone is the final session will be a session with David. And that should be really marvelous, because by then we'll know his material well and can ask him the really hard questions.
All right.
He can handle it.
With that, let me say good evening to everyone, and take care till I have the pleasure of seeing you all next.
And please review the reminders each week, because it'll tell you which chapters to be reading for next time and so on. And I look forward very much to seeing you all a week from now.
2 weeks from now.
I'm sorry.
Thank you,
2 weeks
Dean.
from
Thank you for posting the link to Lama Rod's site.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, because I do want to pull in some of his stuff.
Yeah.
His stuff is very interesting.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
Good night.
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 Thank you.
Take care.